Go.
You're listening to The People's Show.
You come at the King, you best not miss.
Left circle Besser, one-time slap shot, he scores. Brock Besser beats Jordan Bennington on the power play, and the Canucks are up 4-0.
With Sat, Dan, and Randeep.
The biggest thing to hit Canada because the Maple Leafs suck.
On the official home of the Canucks.
Goes all the way down the ice, here's Pedersen after it. He's got a chance at a breakaway. Pedersen in clean, is tripped by Murray, but he scores. Tiki Pete comes out of the box and puts the puck into the back of the net.
Sportsnet 650.
Welcome, citizens of the People's Show. We come to you live on Sportsnet 650 on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. It's Dan Riccio, Satyar, Sean, Randeep, Janda. The People's Show is here, and we cannot be the People's Show without you, the people. 650 on the Dunbar Lumber text line. You can always dial us up, 604-280-0650. We'll try to squeeze you in if we can at any point during the course of the program. Another big one coming up for you today. We'll dive in on the Canucks. Who could have a breakout season? Who are the most important players 2 weeks out from training camp officially beginning? At least 2 weeks and a day, though. Don't tell that to Brendan Batchelor, who's already in mid-season form, checking out the Canucks skating at UBC today. We'll have our preseason power rankings, or end of preseason power rankings for the NFL, as we have kickoff tomorrow night. And we'll tee up for Canada, El Salvador, which is coming up at 4:30 on Sportsnet. Brad Fay will join us. He was at Larry Walker's induction today into Cooperstown. Ryan Miller, former Canuck goalie and new assistant with the U.S. men's national team that will be heading to the Olympics. And Mark Schofield joins us after 5 o'clock as well, as we get into all of the NFL discussions today on The People's Show. What's up, Sat? What's up, Randeep?
What's going on? Ready to go here.
All right, and Randeep's mic is not working either. So everybody's got a little bit of technical issues off the top of The People's Show today.
I'm back here.
All right,
I'm back. I'm here at least.
Man, just somebody throw me a life raft, okay?
I thought it was going to take the next 4 hours off. I was like, all right, mic ain't working. I'm going home. Now I'm here. I'm doing all right.
We're all good. Perfect. Okay. We'll figure out Sat, but we've got a lot to go through today. Randeep, you're wearing your Yankees hat.
Damn right I am.
Were you cheering more for Derek Jeter today over Larry Walker? What is this about?
Okay,
Come on. Where do your allegiances lie here, bro?
I have an admission to make. My Colorado Rockies hat is in the wash, by the way. No, I'm not a huge Derek Jeter guy.
I mean, you could have had an Expos hat at some point.
No, because I stick to one team, unlike you.
Oh, man.
All right? I don't bounce around.
One team.
Yeah, I'm not the Mike Sillinger of supporting teams like you are. Just, pick up another team
What
when you
about
feel
how you
like
dropped the Grizzlies for the New York Knicks?
Yeah, once the Grizzlies get back, I will support them, but that's the only one.
Okay.
But no, today was Larry Walker is a bigger deal. I am a Jeter fan, but I always loved Posada and Bernie Williams and Andy Pettitte, those other guys more so than Jeter. Today was about Larry Walker for me. Proud Canadian moment.
All right. It was pretty amazing, and sticking to the SpongeBob pin on his lapel was a pretty nice way of doing things, but we're excited. Brad Fay is going to join us. I mean, to see Larry Walker go in was a pretty incredible moment. Somebody that, I thought was long awaiting a Hall of Fame induction. Kind of like Alex McGillney with the Hockey Hall of Fame. It's like, what is this guy not yet doing, being enshrined and immortalized by the sport of hockey? Well, that finally happened for Larry Walker today. We'll get into that a little bit more as well.
And we no longer have to read the laundry list of achievements anymore to say he deserves to be in. The batting titles, the MVP, all of that, he's in the Hall. It's done, folks.
It is done, and it's kind of a crazy week of Canadian content. Okay, here's Larry Walker being immortalized. You have Leila Annie Fernandez and Felix Auger-Aliassime and Gabby as well into the doubles semifinals. So a lot of Canadian content at the U.S. Open. Canadian men going up against El Salvador tonight. So there's a lot going on there we're going to dive into a lot of those storylines, and I believe we have Sat figured out.
Yeah, we are good now. Hello. How's
Okay.
it going, gentlemen?
Rager texting in, did the draft go so badly last night that Sat just called it quits?
No, I feel pretty good about my draft. I feel pretty good. I'm not too worried about it.
That's good. It's good to hear. We all want to be feeling like today and until at least until Sunday 11 a.m. you feel good about your fantasy team. After that,
Give us
it's
a
probably
day.
downhill.
One day. That's all we ask for. One day.
Yeah, if you don't feel good about your fantasy team immediately after the draft, you're going to have a hell of a year. You know the guy that's regretting his quarterback pick right after he makes it?
Yeah.
Don't be that guy.
Or me taking Travis Kelce 6th overall.
Yeah,
But that's another story.
That was interesting.
Great.
It's another story for another day. All right. Keep coming in on the Dunbar Lumber text line. We always appreciate you, the people here on the People's Show. So, a couple of different things, and we're going to go through all of these as we get closer to the Canucks season beginning and really diving in to the training camp storylines. But the Canucks' most important players, we talked about Pettersson and Hughes and how important it is that they get ready, they get into training camp as soon as possible, get their contract sorted out. We talked about that yesterday. Check it out on the podcast. And today, just to unravel another layer of that, who are the most important players for the Canucks? Because this is a team that needs a lot to go right. After the season they had last year, they can't afford some jobs probably on the line if they don't figure things out. But I think in a lot of cases, you know what you're going to get from some of the top-end guys. And with that being said, who is the most important Canucks player going into this season?
So for me, it's not about projecting long-term, right? Like who the best player is, this and that. Like for me, it's about, okay, this season, who's the most important player? And to me, it all comes down to Oliver Ekman-Larsson this year. And everything for this team and this defense comes down to him and what he can provide for you. So I think this year's single most important player for the Canucks is Oliver Ekman-Larsson.
So OEL's an interesting one because the jury's out on him, right? And that's part of the reason where the Canucks have made that bet where they expect him to be good. That's why you sign on to that contract. That's why you trade for him. And sure, getting rid of those albatross contracts was important to free up space, but you potentially bring one back. So I can understand for this year why OEL is a part of that conversation, or is at least top 2 or 3 in that conversation, guys. But here's the issue. Also in the Quinn Hughes element, he's supposed to, in theory, make his life easier as well. Where you have a veteran back there that's been there, done that, basically, upskilling or upgrading on a Alex Edler.
Yeah.
That is, in theory, what's supposed to happen.
Upskilling, I like that. Is it a new term?
It is.
Cool.
Yeah, I've heard it since
Now
I was in
it
high
is.
school. But in sports, I haven't heard it that much.
It's just like me and Herocious,
But
Upskilling is a new thing.
Upskilling is an actual word. You made up
Is
Herocious.
upskilling a real word? Sat, can you confirm or deny?
think,
Dictionary Sat?
Upskilling?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
You can slap a hyphen on that and make it a word. Upskilling.
Okay, we'll
Do
take
whatever
it.
we can now. Yeah,
Damn
I
right.
guess
We're in
just
radio.
changing.
We can make up words. You've done it.
We'll allow it. Okay, upskilling
I'm
from
confident it's a word, though.
Oliver Ekman-Larsson, upskilling the Canucks. Okay, kidding aside.
I looked it up. If we were playing Scrabble, it would count.
Wow.
See? University educated Reach. Come on, give me some props.
Okay.
Education?
Ferocious is not a real word, though.
Look at Randy. A couple weeks ago flexing that he wakes up at 6:30 in the morning. Now he's flexing he's got a university education.
You know how much money you spend on a degree? If I can't flex that, I can't flex anything.
Then what are you doing, right?
Exactly. Why did I spend the money?
I'm just a college dropout. No, that's not true. I eventually passed, I think. In any case, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, what's funny about him is the polarizing thoughts about him and what he is as a player. Is he already finished, even though he's just entering his 30s? What he was is not what he is now. But, the hard part about Oliver Ekman-Larsson is we're kind of projecting into an unknown, right? Because we've seen a player that has had a tough time over the last couple of years, and you're projecting a certain amount and having a certain amount of faith that in a better situation, a situation he is more motivated in, essentially, he's going to have more success as a player. And it is absolutely integral because, okay, like I can ballpark a floor for Quinn Hughes and Travis Hamonic and what I'm going to get from those guys. But let's say, as we're projecting, the second pair is to be Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Tucker Poolman. Like, I have no idea what those guys could be. Fine, they could be above average, they could be awful. You know, like there's a wide range of outcomes from those two players.
I mean, a lot can go sideways there, right? I mean, and that's the biggest thing. It's those range of outcomes that are so opposed they can create so many different issues, and that's really what it comes down to for me more than anything, right? It's like, which outcome is it going to come down to? And start going through the players, like, yeah, it's not so much about, okay, like I feel confident Pettersson and Hughes are going to bounce back. Like, I'm not worried about that. I'm not really worried about Garland. I'm not really worried about Bo Horvat and JT Miller. I'm not really worried about Brock Besser. It's really a few premium positions that matter on defense as you go through it. And I think, like, down the middle, Horvat and Jason Dickinson also come in high on that list as far as success for the season goes.
Okay, those premium, positions, we got a lot of text coming in on this as well. One unsigned saying the most important player is your best player. We'll get into that. So Sat's vote goes to OEL. Mine is going in a different direction. I'm going to the goalie, Thatcher Demko. And I've said this a couple of times over the last few weeks. The way this team profiles reminds me a lot of Winnipeg. It reminds me of that Winnipeg team that was led by an explosive top six, which the Canucks, in theory, have, and a very, very good goalie. Defense, we're not so sure right now. OEL is a huge question mark. Huge question mark. The fit of those pairings is a massive question mark. And if it doesn't go right, especially early on in the year, Thatcher Demko is your most important player, because there could be cracks in that defense all season long. He's going to have to play, potentially, a Connor Hellebuck type of role where you've got all offense and puck management is an issue. To me, Thatcher Demko is the answer.
Marcus and Gibsons agrees. Demko is the most important, not only for this year, but also long-term. We need DiPietro to develop in Abbotsford rather than be on the Canucks as a backup if needed as well. Shouts to Marcus and Gibsons, freshly shaved in order to get into the People's Show Fantasy League, the Menza Barba, as we would call it in Italian. The big beard has been dropped. That was his bribe to get into the People's Show Fantasy League, and he completed it. We've got photo evidence as well.
Okay, sorry, that's a Menza, what?
Menza Barba.
Menza Barba, okay. Punjabi,
Scusi.
Punjabi, we call that a dotty, okay, but
Okay.
fair enough.
Boppity boopy.
Boppity boopy. Okay. I totally see the Demko thing in that, Sat, this is not, I don't think we can project this to be a quality defensive team all of a sudden, right? They were one of the worst in the league last year, if not the worst by some metrics. If you're thinking about a quality defensive season for the Canucks, like, what do they end up in the mid-range of the league? Like, they're not going to end up at the other end of the spectrum. This is a Canucks team that's going to live on its forward group and live on offense, or hope to at least, and be about average defensively, which would be a big improvement from where they were a year ago.
Well, that's kind of the thing here, right? I mean, and going through every single team in the West, especially in the Pacific, every single team has flaws. You're not trying to, judge this team against, ideally, a perfect hockey team that has 4 good lines and has 3 really solid deep pairs and 2 good goalies. Like, that's just not how teams are built, at least not for the most part, especially in the Western Conference and the Pacific Division. It's about how much better can you get? And the Canucks are trying to improve from being god-awful defensively to being, hey, passable. And if you get to that margin, that's a huge difference. And also, if you have more players this year that opportunity when injuries happen that don't bleed you to death, that changes things significantly as well. It's not so much about the ceiling necessarily sometimes. It's about how much you're raising that floor. And based on everything with this roster, the floor should be considerably higher than it was last year. The question is, can they approximate that ceiling in order to be a powerhouse team?
Well, there's a couple of things here too. So OEL, like the contract, is a big worry for a lot of people. I see Donkey the Roofer coming in on the Dunbar Lumber text line. Does motivation increase foot speed when talking about OEL? But you could say the same about Demko. The Canucks made a big commitment there, Randeep, on what is a very short resume that Thatcher Demko has built. It's a good resume. It is built off of a track record where he was looked at as one of the best goalie prospects in the game before showing that first in the playoffs against the Vegas Golden Knights and then carrying that into last year where through the first half, he was maybe a Vezina candidate or really being in that conversation at the very least. But it is still a very big commitment on what is a short track record. So you want to see a lot of the same things from Demko this year that encourage the Canucks to go long-term with him at 5x25.
Of course you do. That's a commitment that they made. And listen, he is a well-looked-at, it's tough to call him a prospect, but he's a number one goalie in the NHL now. And we're going to talk to Ryan Miller a little bit later on in the show. Want to get his thoughts on Thatcher Demko. But look at the stats from last year. High danger shots against. Thatcher Demko was top 10 in the league. He was up there with guys like John Gibson, who didn't have much support offensively, right? When we talk about team stats, shots against the Canucks, and these were high-quality shots that they were giving away, they were up there with Chicago and Buffalo. That's not good. We go further. Goals against, they're bottom half of the league. They're bottom 10. Penalty kill, they're bottom half of the league. So in order to correct that, they've made some really smart signings and trades. Jason Dickinson, Connor Garland, the back end, of course, there's some questions there, but those are some bold moves. If they don't pan out, especially in that first 10 to 15 games of the year, you're going to need this guy to step up massively. There is some significant turnover. There are things being done maybe differently this year with Brad Shaw. It's not going to hit the ice ready to go immediately, and that's why I think the start for this team especially, the amount of pressure they face in this market, Thatcher Demko is definitely the most important player based on the fact that the storm that is, there's a lot of optimism in this market, but we've lived in this city. We watch this hockey team. We know how quickly that can turn, and that's why you need a quick start with your number one goalie to start off the year.
Well, you do, and Jaro Halak's going to be a big part of it as well. But yeah. I think Thatcher Demko does probably rank pretty high because as much as, hey, we have faith in him being a good goalie, he has pedigree and all that, he hasn't done it for a full season. He's done it in a bubble for a handful of games. He did it last year in a shortened season. And early on, it was, there was a bit of a hot potato between him and Braden Holtby. They both kind of struggled early on. Then Demko lights out. He was a Vezina candidate based on how he played. Like he was that good at the end of the season. But can he do it for a full year? And that's still something we haven't seen yet from him. And that's going to be a critical part of their success this season. Like Thatcher Demko truly is a star-level goaltender.
Who are the Canucks' most important players? Let us know, 650 on the Dunbar Lumber text line. Okay, so OEL, Demko, and I see a lot of these texts, and I'm kind of with them. The most important players are your best players, whether that's Pettersson, Hughes, whomever else. But for me, it is Pettersson. He is the straw that stirs the drink on this team, to use an old cliche. And you saw it last year. It's kind of I know the Canucks record funnily kind of turned around as Pettersson went out of the lineup, at least early on after the injury came for him. But eventually you started to see the wheels fall off, and the Canucks weren't able to keep that up because they just didn't have their biggest offensive driver on the roster. Do they have more of an ability to paper over that crack if Pettersson misses some games? Sure, but it can only last for so long. And at the end of the day, the Canucks need Pettersson to be, if this team is going to develop into a contender, which is what they are hoping this build becomes, obviously, it's because Pettersson is a top 10 center in the league or better. And last year, I would have said he's on the right path to get there. Not that I'm off that train, but there are more doubters now than there were a year ago of Elias Pettersson. And I don't think that's unfair to say.
I mean, if Elias Pettersson, isn't that next level superstar player, then yeah, this team is in a lot of trouble, right? I feel pretty confident about him being at that level, right? I mean, but ultimately, yeah, it is your best players, and your best players at the same time are also part of who are your highest paid players, and that's where a guy like Oliver Ekman-Larsson comes in. Because as we're speaking today, there isn't a Canuck that makes more money per year than Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Now, maybe he's number 3 by the time, Pettersson and Hughes sign their contracts. But right now, he's the highest paid player on this team with 6 years remaining on his contract. Even if you don't view him as your best player, one of your best players, he has to perform at least close to that level. I have a lot of confidence in Pettersson and Hughes. I don't think what we saw from Pettersson the first couple years was just kind of a mirage and that he's never going to get to that level or above that again. And I think with Quinn Hughes, what we saw in his rookie season is truly what he is and above too. So I'm not as worried about those guys. But to add to your point, yeah, of course, if Pettersson and Hughes aren't superstars, then yeah, this team, the ceiling all of a sudden is not going to be as high as we thought it was.
I think for the most part, guys, this city, this fan base has been very optimistic on Pettersson, as they should be. The guy's a special player. We've seen it numerous times. But once you start making 7 figures, you're trending towards 8, guess what? The game kind of changes. The temperature goes up a notch. Hey, Mitch Marner was loved in Toronto. And then what happened? He started making $11 million, and something kind of changed there. The holdout didn't help.
Yeah.
But there was also that once you start making serious money, there's a different thought process that goes on. And Elias Pettersson, I'm very optimistic just like you, but once you start making that major payday, the expectation goes up as well. The expectation is that, okay, start staying a little bit more healthy. Start taking that step offensively a little bit more. Can you be that, 80, 90-point guy? Eventually, you got to see that. And once you start making that coin, the expectation is you take that step. So it will be a little different this year. It will be. Mm-hmm. I think that goes from a media perspective, but correct me if I'm wrong, fans, 650. I think once you start making that payday, all of a sudden, the expectation is, all right, it's time to go. You're making big boy money. You got to be more consistent. You got to be ready to go all season long.
Well, the best example is Mitch Marner, right? He's making close to $11 million, has been a top-end scorer in the league, even with the new contract, but because he hasn't been able to get it done in the playoffs, you'd ask 100 Leaf fans, and I bet about more than 50% of them would probably say, yeah, trade Mitch Marner. He can't get it done in the playoffs. And that might seem harsh, but that's the reality that star players live in this country is you have a high bar to reach when you start getting paid, and those expectations are put on you. And that's, we've already started to hear it a little bit around Pettersson and certainly around Hughes. Oh, he can't play defense, all those things. But that's only going to get processed to the nth degree once those guys get the contracts that we're expecting them to get over the next couple of weeks. And that's, that's the pressure you live with as a star player in the league. Pettersson, he's going to be fine, but fine isn't good enough for Elias Pettersson. He's got to raise his game to another level. And I think it's one of the major storylines of the Canucks season, whether or not he's able to do that.
Well, I think that he will get to that point.
Yeah.
One player that we haven't really talked about that I think, ranks above me, when I did my list, I had OEL number 1, I had Thatcher Demko number 4, and number 3, I had Pettersson / Hughes, but who I had at number 2? Bo Horvat.
I was going to say Miller, but Horvat makes sense.
I mean, Bo Horvat. Okay, Bo Horvat offensively, we know what he is as an offensive centerman, right? We know that he can provide and he can score. Defensively, his game's been a bit up and down. Is there another step Bo Horvat can take? Because if Bo Horvat showed what he's shown so far in his career, that's not bad, but is it really going to put him in that, echelon of best, second-line centers in the league? Is going to be in that discussion? Because right now, I don't even have him making Team Canada, let alone, looking at him being at that level. So does Bo Horvat have another step? I know that's what Travis Green talked about. I think for Bo, I think he's a guy that's really critical here. Have we seen the best of him? Because he's getting to that point of his career. He has 2 years remaining on his contract. What is Bo Horvat? How do you want to invest in Bo Horvat? Can he take that other step? I think he's a player that I have circled needing a big season of great importance for this team.
And what helps him this year, right? It's Jason Dickinson. All of a sudden, you have a player that can play that relentless maybe style of game in that 3C position, can take those tougher matchups. And I know Pettersson's been taking more of those when he's been healthy in the past, but you have more support in that role now. And we're not talking about, two players at the bottom of the lineup like a Jay Beagle and Brandon Sutter that maybe were outplaying their roles, and that shutdown matchup wasn't a good one. We're talking about a 26-year-old centerman who relishes those opportunities and likes the matchup role. That frees up Bo more. So do you see that next step? Do you see a player that is in that 70-point range? Does he set another career high in a full season?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need that if you're taking some defensive responsibility off of him.
Let us know on the Dunbar Lumber text line. Can you see a kind of a breakout season a little bit from Bo Horvat? Does he have another level to reach as a player on this roster now with some better line mates and more consistent line mates we expect for the season? Coming up, Brad Fay is going to join us. He was at Larry Walker's induction in Cooperstown. He's headed to Flushing Meadows as well, and we'll tee up for Canada. Alfonso Davies got everybody up in arms today on Twitter. So I want to touch on that and look ahead to Canada, El Salvador, in a big match for the Canadians coming up on Sportsnet later on this evening. It is the People's Show, Sportsnet 650.
You're listening to The People's Show with Sat, Dan, and Randeep on the official home of the Canucks, Sportsnet 650.
And of course, thank you, Canada, for all your support I've received throughout the years from my home country. I share this honor with every Canadian, and I hope that all you Canadian kids out there that have dreams of playing in the big leagues, that seeing me here today gives you another reason to go after those dreams.
You get goosebumps here in Larry Walker. Pride of Maple Ridge, pride of Canada. Going into the Baseball Hall of Fame today, second Canadian to do so. Fergie Jenkins the first, and now today, Larry Walker enshrined. And sure, Yankees fans will be gloating about Derek Jeter forever, but for us here north of the border, it's all about Moose Lips, Canadian Moose Lips, the greatest Twitter handle of all time as well. Larry Walker.
Just awesome to see, and this Yankees fan is all about Larry Walker today. Derek Jeter is not even resonating that much for me, but shout out to Shai Davidi.
Sure.
You believe me? I don't care. Sportsnet.ca, Shai Davidi's got an awesome big read on Larry Walker. Check that out today. Just a really cool look into the person Larry Walker, not necessarily the player.
Yeah, man. Like it's one of those things about Larry Walker. I remember growing up watching him play, and it was always this sense of pride because, we see a lot of Canadian hockey players. We don't see a ton of Canadians in other sports, but every time Larry Walker did something, he's in the home run derby, he's at the All-Star game, he's going ham with the Rockies, it really gave you this real sense of pride. And we see that more nowadays because we have so many great athletes, and we'll talk to Brad Fay coming up about it as well. But one of the things I always remember was how much pride you had watching Larry Walker perform as one of the best players in baseball, knowing that he's Canadian.
It's funny because there was just so much rhetoric about his career that was just kind of asinine for so long, as like arguments against him being in the Hall of Fame. Oh, he didn't win a World Series. Well, I mean, that 94 Expos team would have been pretty good, right? He didn't get it done in the playoffs. Like, actually, his playoff numbers were kind of fine. There's just a lot about Larry Walker that never really made a lot of sense, and the whole Coors thing knocked him down a peg too. But we talked a little bit about that yesterday, and no need to dwell on it anymore because he's a Hall of Famer. And let's head now to Cooperstown. Brad Fay joining us here on the People's Show. What's up, Brad?
Hey guys, I'm out of Cooperstown now on my way to New York for the tennis. So I apologize, it's a little bit windy on the highway, but hopefully you can hear me fine.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, you're just getting to cover all the fun events this week. That's crazy.
I don't think this was planned, and then all of a sudden it happens with Felix and Fernandez, and it's like, I think you better go down there. So border crossings are difficult, so I'm already here. So they just said send my way down. So it's interesting. Why not, right?
What was that experience like, being at Cooperstown and seeing Larry Walker go into the Hall of Fame?
It's very cool. I've been to a few, and it's funny because I'm not really a baseball guy, but it just happens that it's usually in July, and then even now it's sort of more of a downtime for me, so they send me, and I got to see Tim Raines, Vladdy Sr., Roy Halladay, which was obviously very emotional, and this one was the best for me only because being a guy from BC and like me, and being a Canadian and the second one to go in, it's incredible. So it was pretty cool. Got a chance to chat with him yesterday at the house that they rented, and didn't really have that kind of access before. So I enjoyed this one. I thought he was excellent today. I thought his speech was great.
You talk about, not having that access before, and Larry's a pretty private individual. I know even with interview requests in the past, he's not that available. He likes to deflect that attention, loves to give his teammates love as well. What did you learn about Larry Walker from his peers and family over the last day or so?
Well, yeah, I think it's exactly what you say. I mean, he's quintessentially Canadian, and maybe we'll get tired of, people telling us, oh, we're really nice people, but his humility comes right through, and everybody around him talks about that and appreciates that he's flippant about things. The first story that he tells today, basically getting his plaque, is about when he didn't know that he had to touch second base on his way back to first in one of his first minor league games. I mean, a lot of guys are not going to go that route and admit it, and I think that speaks volumes as to who he is. But boy, every chance he gets, he thanks his teammates, he thanks his family, and he thanks Canada. He loves his country, that's for sure.
It felt like a very hockey speech,
Yeah.
you could hear the young hockey player in Larry Walker as he was up there chit-chatting. You think about Canadian baseball, and he mentioned in his speech, he hopes that there's more coming and that they can see him today. But it feels, Brad, like his legacy has already kind of been there through guys like Justin Morneau and Joey Votto, and maybe even going back to Jason Bay.
Yes, I agree, and I think that was part of his thing, saying thank you to Canada, and hope that he inspires people. And I know Justin Morneau, talks so highly of him. Said the first time they played each other that Walker sent a note over to him before the game, days before social media, but in the locker room, made sure that the locker room attendant took a note over to him and said, hey, proud of you, good luck tonight, and great to have another Canadian in with him. And when you mentioned about the feeling like a hockey speech all the way down to Donald Fear speaking, I almost started laughing when he comes out on behalf of Marvin Miller, and it makes sense in that regard because he used to be involved with it. But here it's the PA of the NHL, the head of that, comes out to speak about, at the same ceremony where a guy who had the hockey dream and stuck with baseball is going into the Hall of Fame. It's pretty wild.
Well, it is, and kind of looking at the strength of Canadian sports, and we'll get to tennis coming up in a second here, but as much as we're talking about great baseball players, as good as Joey Votto is, he's still quite a way away from what Larry Walker kind of got to. And as much as we're sitting here and saying, yeah, we're going to see a lot more great Canadian athletes, Larry Walker set a pretty high bar, hasn't he, Brad? As far as if we're going to find another player better than him, he's going to be an all-time great, because this is a pretty high bar.
I agree. It's pretty tough, and overall, that bar they mentioned it, the opening, and the lady that runs the Hall of Fame. Her first thing she said was 1% of all ball players end up in the Hall of Fame. So she said that's how exclusive the club is. And then now with Larry Walker joining Fergie Jenkins, it's 0.006% of the Hall of Famers are Canadians. But who was it? Bichette. I want to say both. Dante Bichette. Sort of presented Walker. They don't do it in the way that you come up in the NFL or the NBA where someone comes up on stage, but they do it on a tape, on a video. And Dante Bichette said that Larry Walker's the best baseball player I've ever seen, and he said it's not close in terms of considering everything that he can do. So when you're talking 5 tools and hitting for power and average like he did for so many years, I agree. The bar is set. Votto's the guy that has a chance to catch him, but I agree with you fully. He's got a long way to go, as great as he is.
You're listening to The People Show. We're joined by Brad Fay of Sportsnet. And Brad, there's this campaign online that Larry Walker did reference in his speech as well. We saw that with Tim Raines to a certain degree, and now I see that Curt Flood is another individual that people are rallying around, trying to get him into the Hall of Fame. Do you think that really resonated with Larry? And it feels like this is becoming something in baseball where writers are kind of buying into the public perception in these campaigns.
I think so, and I think that
I think we may have lost Brad. Somewhere on
the highway caught him.
Yeah, somewhere on the highway to New York.
I was looking forward to that answer as well.
Somewhere on the highway to Flushing Meadows, we lost Brad Fay. We'll try to reconnect. Do want to get a few thoughts in on on tennis as he's headed to the U.S. Open to watch Felix and Leila Annie Fernandez in their semifinals. But it really is kind of that we've seen it. It's kind of the Twitter era, the social media era, where it started with Tim Raines, as you mentioned, where you can campaign for guys online and it will get noticed. You know, maybe guys that had been not thinking about Larry Walker or Tim Raines all of a sudden start to in a different way. And that's kind of, we have Brad Fay back. Brad, yeah, we just lost you there for a second, but that's really what we're seeing is the online Twitter campaigns are kind of getting these baseball writers that may not have thought of somebody a certain way or didn't watch a ton of Larry Walker in Colorado and didn't dive deep into his numbers. It's maybe I do have to take a second look at this guy.
Yeah, and I laughed that Larry Walker mentioned that in his speech too, saying I'm not much of a social media guy, but I have to thank them for helping me get there. And he said he put out that hashtag Fergie needs a friend, and there was Fergie Jenkins there to greet him today, which was really cool. So I like it. I think that it makes sense because things change over time in terms of what people feel are the worthy numbers, and then if you're caught in an era where they're measuring you a different way, maybe it's unfair, and that's what they have the sort of the long period on the ballot for, and the Veterans Committee and all these things. And it's you're a Hall of Famer or you're not. It doesn't matter how long it takes, because when you're in there, you're getting in there because you deserve to be a Hall of Famer, and that's where Larry Walker's at.
And Brad, you mentioned you're on your way to Flushing Meadows to watch the U.S. Open, and we have two Canadians in the respective fields getting to the semifinal. We have Leila Annie Fernandez, who's been just marvelous, capturing the imagination of North America, I'd say, with her run as a teenager at the U.S. Open, getting to the semifinal. And then Felix Auger-Aliassime. But with Annie Fernandez, what is it about her? I mean, already she's starting to build some star power. Is it because it's a bit of a novelty, or do you think there's something here that has people this enthralled by her already?
I think that, well, first of all, she's charming as hell in all those interviews, and not so much that it's, she's sweet. She is, but she says all the right things. In that interview, halfway through this run, probably 3 matches ago, and they said, when did you really believe you had a chance to win? And she said, before it started. I think it was great, and she said it with such conviction, not like with a giggle and sort of like, blah, whatever, like making something up. But on the court, her play, she's just exciting, and she's explosive. The lefty aspect helps. Everybody loves it. Like Shapovalov got a lot of early fans. There's some excitement about that. But her speed is, I think Chris Everett mentioned it on one of the matches, just saying she's as fast, as anybody on tour, the balls that she gets to. So she's earned all the accolades by doing everything that people want to see, and she's a rising star worldwide now all of a sudden overnight. It's crazy.
It's amazing to see, and Emma Raducanu, actually, from Great Britain, she was also born in Toronto, so there's another Canadian connection, which is pretty amazing. But the U.S. Open crowd, you're going to be there very shortly. It feels like young players, if they're 18, 19, 20 years old, they just get more confidence off that crowd. It's a different type of tournament, isn't it? Where young players like Shapovalov a few years before, now with Felix, and of course with Leila Annie Fernandez, it just feels like they feed off that energy of the crowd that much more in this major.
Yeah, maybe the energy, the sort of that they bring with the more fist pumps of that, and everybody's, seen enough of the greatest generation, not seen enough where they want to go away, but it's like they love to see somebody else step in to the spotlight. In this case, with Nadal and Federer not there, it's, makes it more of an opportunity. But I agree. It's like I always, I've never been, so I'm excited, first of all, to go. And I love both Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. I think they're a cut above everything else in tennis, but they're different in the sense that the Wimbledon is that everything is very, staid, and you're just quiet, and you applaud like a golf clap, and it's wear the white. And then the U.S. Open is like rock and roll tennis. So you get the young players on both sides under the lights. That's when it really becomes electric, because they realize pretty quickly that the fans want them to react that way, and that's the way New York is. So she fits right into that. I think Felix is coming towards that. His game is just something that everybody loves to watch, and he seems to be a little more reserved. I love that Leila pumps her fist almost every single point. It's fantastic.
I mean, she's just so much fun to watch. And the thing with Felix, you're right. I mean, he's so talented and he's so well put together that if you're a tennis purist, it's a lot of fun just watching him play. But, it's really funny. He's only 21 years old, right? And he's ranked 12 in the world. And he had the disappointment at the Olympics as well. He thought he would do better, and he got out early. He's had some ups and downs. But, with tennis, Brad, you know how it's like. It's very hard to be a young tennis player and be consistent, even at a high level, and win. How do you view his ceiling still as a player, and what this can do for his confidence here at the U.S. Open?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I know last night after his match, he said he's the first male player. It happens with the women all the time, the younger ones getting to Final Fours, but he's the first player born in the 2000s on the men's side to get to this stage, get to a semi of a Grand Slam. But it seems like he's been coming along for so long that it almost feels like, come on already, we're waiting for him, because at 17 they anointed him that he was going to be the next great player. So I think it's sort of perspective in that sense, but it's just the consistency for him. I think sometimes he comes up with a verbal double fault at an inopportune time, and every one of these situations is an experience that he'll use. And he didn't have a good tournament in Toronto, disappointing for us doing that event. And then you didn't see this coming, and all of a sudden he looks unstoppable at the U.S. Open. So maybe that's life of a young player.
Brad, we're all jealous of the week you're having. Safe drive to New York there in Flushing Meadows, and we'll be chatting soon. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
There is Brad Fay, just getting to do all the really cool nerdy stuff this week. Going to Cooperstown, watching Larry Walker's induction, and now headed to Flushing Meadows. It's you think about tennis and the dominance we've seen for so many years. Serena has kind of faded a little bit over the last little while. And Djokovic is still atop the mountain on the men's side, but Federer and Nadal both feeling the age quite a bit. Certainly Federer even more so. And it's really creating an avenue for all of these really talented Canadians to have success. We saw it with Bianca already and her slam win. Now you're seeing it with Layla. Felix and Shapo are going to be contenders, and it feels like a lot of Grand Slams over the next few years, but you don't. We felt it with Milos for so long, where he'd get close and he'd have to go up against one of the big guns, and it would fall apart. It feels like the door is more open for this crop of Canadian talent to really have a ton of success, not just regularly, but even in the Slam events.
Yeah, in a big way, right? And, it takes time, right? And, I think sometimes we get so caught up in the moment that we want to believe and will these players to greatness right away, right? And we want to see it happen. And as soon as they kind of go through some ups and downs, it's easy to sell that stock. But these players are so young still. And as far as Felix Auger-Aliassime goes, I still view him as the best player on the men's side. I think Shapo obviously has a higher ranking. He's been a bit more consistent. He's a bit older. But I think as far as overall skill goes and putting it all together, Felix Auger-Aliassime has that type of potential. The only question is, can he kind of get to that? But I still view him as being the best tennis player for Canada and long-term the best hope on the men's side to do some great things.
Yeah, I like his game as well compared to Shapo. And hey, listen, they can both win a bunch of tournaments. But when we're talking about who can be up there with a Daniil Medvedev and a Zverev and Tsitsipas and that level of player, because one of those guys, if not maybe a couple of those guys, are going to be the next ones. After Novak retires, whenever that is, after Nadal and Federer step away, one of those three guys, along with Felix and maybe a handful of other guys, are going to be competing for that top spot. I think Felix's all-around game is just really well-rounded. Milos was great, but we knew his game was heavy on the serve, and mobility was an issue. Injuries were an issue. His overall game wasn't quite there. Felix is different. And on the women's side, we're seeing with Leilani Fernandez as well, where she's got the power game, but she's good around the net. She can really get some torque behind her shots. Bianca is a majors winner. So this, generation has that complete game, where in previous years you could maybe poke holes through the games of a Milos or a Jeannie Bouchard. This next generation is just that much more complete.
It is the People's Show. Dan Riccio, Satyar Shah, and Randeep Janda. So coming up at 4:30, Canada and El Salvador. Just after the break, we're going to talk with Ryan Miller, former Canuck goalie, and of course, going to be coaching the U.S. men's Olympic national team coming up this February. So we'll be chatting with Ryan Miller in just a moment. But, we found out yesterday Alphonso Davies was not going to be a part of Team Canada's final match. Suffered a knock in the game against the U.S. and was sent home early to Bayern Munich. And there's a panic that sets in as a Canadian soccer fan because you feel like something's awry or a player's all of a sudden going to stop playing for Canada. And Alphonso Davies did himself no favors here. But the thing about this, and we're going to have some fun with it later on, but the thing about this is Canada's got other guys here. They've got a Jonathan David who's in the lineup. They've got Tajon Buchanan who's looking pretty good. This is a must-win for Canada tonight, and it's a big one for the other star players that we don't talk about as much as we talk about Alphonso Davies to step up and show that.
If you can't win without Davies in your lineup against a team like El Salvador, and I'm not trying to do the hot take thing here, then you probably don't deserve to make it to the World Cup, right? Because Canada can't just get in because Alphonso Davies is playing at a high level. Like, if we're talking about Canadian soccer getting to that next level and being a World Cup worthy squad, you have to find a way to win matches. You have to find a way to go through adversity, right? And yeah, it's not going to be easy against El Salvador or some of these other countries that aren't exactly locks to make it to the World Cup, but you got to win. You can't have everything just align for you. Like, we're not in a stage where it's like, okay, things have to align perfectly for Canada to get in. You got to force your way in sometimes. And you know what? Tonight, without Alphonso Davies, can you find a way to win this match? Because if you do, you're going to be in a really good spot for the rest of this qualification process.
Yeah, that winning mentality has to be there beyond the guy who plays for Bayern Munich. And, Buchanan is early in that development curve. He's going to go to Europe when he goes to Bruges. Maybe he'll have his success there. But you have to build that chemistry. Davies and Larin look great together. But Lariat has to step his game up. Also, Buchanan has to do that, and
David has kind of been absent. He's been a little bit invisible in this window
for sure. So these guys have to do that. And the other thing is, you can't be a one-player team. We've seen that on the international level, and the elite players can lead their team to a final or even win. But we know how this.
Oh, even Gareth Bale's got a supporting cast,
for
right?
sure. We know how this game of soccer works. If any time for a club level, you could get injured. Yeah. Guess you might not be available for the next window. What's Canada going to do then? So you have to find these stars within the team and have that mentality. El Salvador is a tough team to break down, but Canada's got skill. Buchanan on the wings should create. David has been torching it in the French league.
Yeah.
Should be able to score against this team as well.
So we'll have some fun with what Alphonso Davies Instagrammed earlier today with the caption, "They won't realize how big of a part you play until you're not there to play it anymore." And it set off quite the panic across Canadian soccer fans. It's a big one tonight. It's on Sportsnet at 4:30. Coming up next, Ryan Miller here on Sportsnet 650.